It's 2 a.m. and I look terrible. So for right now, yes, I'm a horse. A few months ago, I uploaded a video about K-pop Demon Hunters, and I mentioned in that video that I had written and created that video within 12 hours of watching the movie. And that's because the movie is just one of those pieces of media that inspires me. And to make a long story short, that inspiration led me to wanting to experiment with 3D animation. Now, I've loved animation almost my entire life, but I've never actually committed to learning it. I've had a few moments where I've attempted 2D animation, and there was this brief moment in 2020 where I followed that one donut blender tutorial. But it wasn't until this month, with both the inspiration of K pop Demon Hunters and the motivation of me making this into a video, that I actually sat down and learned it. Well, at least 3D modeling. I did a little animation, but I was mostly learning just the basics of Blender. On day one of this process, I started by watching videos from indie animators, and I actually watched quite a few videos throughout this entire month that helped move my inspiration into actionable steps. And I'll leave a list of those videos in the description if that would be helpful for you. But first, I need to make sure I mention Jay the Dev Guy. He has a video called Animation Doesn't Have to Be Hard, and that video made this whole process a lot less daunting. I mean, once you understand that animation doesn't need to be the grueling process it has the reputation for, it's so much easier to take the first step.
Animation is just stuff moving around. Seriously.
And reminding myself that it doesn't have to be amazing, it just has to be. I may have leaned a little too hard into that concept on the first day, though, because this is what I made. Okay, hear me out. I was just messing around with the program at face value. I had zero intent of using it efficiently, knowledgeably, or compellingly. My only goal was to make something and have fun making it, and I did. Actually, this made me laugh really hard, and it was also like 1 a.m. on a Saturday, so that probably also helped. But day two is when things really got started. Day two is when I locked in, and I'm just kidding. This is what I made on day two. um, More screwing around, except this time I wanted to animate something. I followed a tutorial from Joey Carlino on basic modeling, pulled an animation from Mixamo, incorrectly applied the skeleton, and made this. He looks like he's in pain. But for real, day three is when things really picked up. I wanted to start out by following some tutorials, and I feel like some may look down on tutorials because it strips the originality from your process and it forces you into the mold of the teacher. And yeah, that can definitely be the case if you're approaching it that way. What's worked for me over a decade of learning different art forms is following a tutorial loosely. Follow it, but make it your own where you can. Follow the spirit of the tutorial rather than the letter of it. And this is the result of loosely following a complete beginner tutorial from Joey Carlino. No modeling was required here. I was just learning how to place down meshes and move them around. And yet, it doesn't entirely look like Joey's. There's always room for making things your own. Day five, I modeled a water bottle because I could, and I struggled for a long time trying to figure out how to make a plastic shader. I mean, you got to make that plastic, and then you also have to make sure the liquid shows up behind it, and then the label shows up on the other side of that. I didn't strictly adhere to a tutorial on this one. I modeled this with an Ice Mountain water bottle as reference, so I was able to take what I had learned from the past few days and try to apply it on my own. And that's what I love about watching tutorials, is that after I follow one, I can attempt to go off on my own and make something entirely from scratch. And sometimes it ends up passable, like this water bottle. And sometimes it looks like this. I'm so sorry, Funk. I tried my best to model your character, but I had no clue what I was doing, and I still don't. But at the end of the first week, I had learned the basics of navigating Blender, modeling, shading, and vaguely knew how the animation system worked. So on day 7, I actually wanted to animate something. So I found a turnaround sheet of the Pixar Luxo lamp and spent a few hours modeling it from scratch. And then a few more hours actually animating it, and here's the result. I'm pretty proud of how this turned out. No, it's no Toy Story 3, but it doesn't have to be. The result I got was something I could say was mostly my own, and that gave me an immense amount of joy. But, but, then there's always that plateau I get right after a major accomplishment like this. I think to myself, I did it once, I can do it again, entirely forgetting the hours of work and effort it took, and then I get frustrated the next time when I try to make the same thing happen in a quarter of the time. Not entirely proud of this one, but here's an untextured frog jumping. The next few days saw a lot of experimenting with other Blender features. I messed with rigid body physics, cloth simulations, and I gave that water bottle hair for some reason. And then, I'll be totally real with you. I did not do much else for the next few days. Low key may have burnt myself out doing a project every single night. I picked it up again a week later when I followed a tutorial from Ryan King Art on robot modeling, and I made this little guy. His name is Ohio Bob, and he's called that because the tutorial called for downloading a PNG for a texture, and I didn't feel like it, so I used this image of Ohio that I already had on my desktop and slapped it onto the side panel. This one wasn't a project I started and finished in one evening like the previous ones. This took a few days of an hour or so at a time before bed, and that made it a lot more manageable. I think it's worth mentioning once again that while Ohio Bob looks almost identical to Ryan's robot, I always made sure to take my own path on some things. I actually modeled the bottom of the robot's head slightly different than Ryan called for, and that one small change made certain problems crop up for me that I wouldn't have faced if I had just followed the tutorial one for one, and so I had to pause the video and take some time to solve the problem I had created before we could continue. Point is, always try to make it your own, and sometimes create your own problems to solve. And then after that, I took another week off, but for reasons I will explain later. On day 27, I noticed that Ryan had uploaded another tutorial, a glass bottle, and this one was super fun to do and was fairly simple, but I want to remind you that 22 days earlier, I was struggling to figure out transparent shaders on the plastic water bottle. I had looked up resources on how to do it online, and those resources gave me one method to solve this issue that involved a lighting engine. It felt off, but it was a solution, so I just moved on. This tutorial provided another method to solve it, and in my opinion, it's much superior. I mean, it's literally just this part of the shader. I didn't have to mess with the render engine, I just had to mix these two nodes together. So much simpler. And it taught me that there's more than one way to do things here and that I shouldn't just settle on one method. Day 28 was fun. I wanted to experiment with Blender's sculpting functionality, so I very loosely followed a tutorial from FX Forge. And after a lot of modeling and crashing because my topology was pure black in the edit window, I ended up with this guy. His name is Cube. It's short for Michael. With Cube, I not only learned the very basics of sculpting, but I also finally figured out subsurface scattering, which is why his skin looks like that. Also, his head's a cube because I was starting to make a head for him, so I just planned on tossing the default cube mesh up there and then subdividing it to get a round shape to work with. But then I just looked at him with the basic cube and I was like, yeah, let's go with that. I think it may have been the same night that I made Cube that I also modeled Hornet from Silksong. I had seen a short from Devolo Design and it seemed simple enough for me to freestyle with everything I had learned over the past month. And I'm actually super proud of the result. This is definitely the thing I'm the most proud of from the past month of learning. So that's where the month came to an end. I learned a lot about Blender and I had a lot of fun doing it. But what comes next? Well, earlier I had mentioned that I took a week off from learning for a certain reason. Well, it turns out, sometimes when you start on a project because something else inspires you, that project will in turn inspire you to do something else. And in this instance, that inspiration lay in the cold, dead eyes of a service droid from Ohio. You see, for a while there's this idea I had that I've been wanting to make, but I felt like I didn't have the skills to pull it off at the time. But after modeling Ohio Bob, I realized that I may finally be able to pull it off now that I can do basic modeling and animation. So while these animations are super rough, they are test animations for a new project I'll be working on. I don't want to give too much away right now, so this is all you get, but I'm super excited about it, And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't just taken that first step. So, if you're watching and want to learn Blender or even any creative skill, let me just say this: just start. Make something, anything. Like what I did on days 1 and 2, I didn't go in with the intent of a magnum opus. I went in to learn and create, and it's that first step that's the most important.